Hello, I'm R.A. Spratt, and I want to welcome people joining us this week on the Yoto podcast platform. Now, just so you know, most of the bedtime stories I tell here are standalone stories. But over the last year, we have been dipping in and out of the epic story of Odysseus, the hero from ancient Greek mythology. And this week, I'm going to be telling the second last installment of that tale. So if you can jump in right here, that'll be fine. I'm sure you'll pick it all up. But if you did want to go back to the beginning and start from the first episode, you can search back through the episodes. The first episode's called Odysseus, as told by Nanny Piggins, and it dropped on January 8th, 2025. Or you can go back and listen to any of the other episodes. You're going to find fairy tales, myths, legends, and mysteries. I hope you enjoy them all. Now let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Bedtime Stories with me, R.A. Spratt. Okay, so before we get into it, things that are coming up. Obviously, my new book is coming out on the 4th of March, and that's Epically Good Greek Myths. And it's a compilation of a lot of the Greek myth stories that we've done recently on this podcast. So it's all the Jason stories and a bunch of other Greek myth stories we've done in the last year or so. So if you want to get a copy of that, go down to your local bookseller after the 4th of March if you're in Australia or New Zealand. Or because I've got the book launch coming up, and it's going to be an online live stream book launch on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and I'm going to upload it onto the podcast as well. So it'll be available through your podcast platforms. So it'll be available through all those things. And if you want to get a signed copy of the book, I am going down to the head offices of Booktopia tomorrow morning in Sydney, and I'm going to sign all the books they've got. So I'm hoping it's several hundred. And then that way, anyone in Australia or New Zealand who would like a signed copy of Epically Good Greek Myths, they can just go and buy it from Booktopia. I'll put a link in the show notes. Now, anyone who is overseas and would like a signed book. This is more difficult because it'll be harder for you to get hold of the book. It'll take a while to get shipped there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a 2-week offer for anyone overseas, and this will open up on the day the book comes out, the 4th of March, and it'll be available for 2 weeks, and it's only available to people who are not in Australia and New Zealand. If you would like my signature to put into one of your books, one of my books that you managed to get your hands on, get shipped to you overseas, or through your local bookseller overseas, you can go to the Buy Me a Coffee page, and I will put up a thing where if you pay $5 Australian, so that's, in pounds, it'll be like $2.50, in US dollars, it'll be like $3 something. So $5 Australian, and then that will cover the cost of me posting you a signed book plate that you can stick in the front of one of your books. Anyway, let's get into it. Let me get on with today's story because it's a cracker. We are continuing on with the story of Odysseus, the Odyssey. It's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed. I was reading like a children's version of the Odyssey, but I gave up on that and I got like a proper version of the Odyssey, as written by Homer. Obviously, it's translated because I do not speak ancient Greek, but it's just a translation of the original, and it's so good. I'm really enjoying it. So anyway, this is my retelling of the bit we're up to is Odysseus and the Bag of Winds, as told by Nanny Piggins. Here we go. "What were you talking to the retired army colonel who lives around the corner about?" Nanny Piggins asked Derrick when the children returned home from school. She had seen the colonel waiting outside the house and hadn't thought much of it. She assumed he was just summing up the courage to knock on the door and ask her to marry him again. But he hadn't. He'd waited until the children came home, then called Derrick over and spoken to him alone. It had been a very brief conversation. Then the colonel had hurried away, back around the corner in the direction of his own house. "Oh, he asked me not to tell you," said Derrick. "I think he's planning a surprise." "Very well," said Nanny Piggins. "He is retired and therefore not allowed to fire guns and fight in wars any more. If wooing me is how he chooses to amuse himself, I suppose it is only polite to go along with it. It's the least I can do to thank him for his service. You'd better keep the secret, I suppose. It probably involves cake, and we wouldn't want to ruin a surprise involving cake." "Yeah, he definitely said I mustn't let the cat out of the bag," agreed Derrick. "What does letting the cat out of the bag even mean?" asked Michael. Good question, said Nanny Piggins. It's a very strange expression. The greater question is, why did they put a cat in the bag in the first place? Seems like a very cruel thing to do. And they never specify what sort of bag. If it was a sack, a great big one, the type potatoes come in, that wouldn't be so bad. Yes, so long as you took the potatoes out first, said Boris. Yes, much more pleasant with the potatoes removed, agreed Nanny Piggins. But a potato sack is large, and if you are going to be kidnapped, especially by a despotic ringmaster, it's much better to be kidnapped inside a nice sack. You see, there's plenty of room for you to kick out at him. And there's lots of room to weep, added Boris. He spoke from experience, having been kidnapped many times too. Most circus performers had, at least most of the circus performers who worked with their ringmaster. But if you put a cat in a handbag, said Nanny Piggins, especially one of those tiny ones that women carry to dinner parties and the theatre, then that's just cruel. Especially if you take the cat to the theatre in the handbag. And it's one of those long plays written by that Shakespeare fellow, said Boris. Indeed, said Nanny Piggins. I've never met a cat that cared for Hamlet. If you must take a cat in a handbag to the theatre, always choose Macbeth. It's only 90 minutes long. And only if the cat agrees, said Boris, because cats are very good at caterwauling, and the actors don't like it if someone in the audience caterwauls, even if there has been a terrible tragedy, like someone eating their last honey sandwich. Boris had once been asked to leave a production of The Mousetrap for exactly this reason, which was a great shame because he never found out who the murderer was, so he'd had a tremendous fear of bed and breakfast hotels ever since. But whatever type of bag you put a cat in, you can be sure that 100% of the time the cat is very pleased to be let out. It might gash you across the face with its claws as it exits, but on the whole it will be delighted to find freedom, and then it will immediately run away, said Nanny Piggins. So really there's no need to worry about letting cats out of bags. The really dangerous thing that you should avoid letting out of a bag at all costs is wind. Wind? Asked Michael. Yes, and by wind I mean the plural, said Nanny Piggins. All the wind in the world. Is she talking about farting? Michael whispered to Boris. Goodness knows, said Boris. Nanny Piggins is too dignified for that. Michael had seen his nanny climb into the ice cream display case at their local milk bar and lick the bottom of the hokey-pokey tub clean, so he was not convinced this was true. No one in the Piggins family has been bold enough to release any kind of wind, said Nanny Piggins, not since what happened to my distant cousin, Odysseus. Odysseus, said Derrick. Is this another story of the Odyssey, the epic tale about her journey home after the Trojan War? Indeed, said Nanny Piggins. The problem began soon after they left the land of the Cyclopses. Running away from Polyphemus? Asked Derrick. Derrick, how many times must I tell you? Ancient Greek heroes do not run away. They rapidly moved to a safe distance, said Nanny Piggins. Yeah, that's a very similar thing, said Derrick. Not in their minds, said Nanny Piggins. So Odysseus and her men were rapidly moving to as great a safe distance as they could, so as not to be hit by the boulders Polyphemus was pelting at them, when they sailed into a fog. They couldn't see where they were going, but it was the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, so they figured if they kept going at full speed, they were unlikely to hit anything. That was until they hit something. Land? Asked Derrick. A whale? Asked Michael. Another Cyclops? Asked Samantha. No, something weirder, said Nanny Piggins. Their boat rammed straight into a brass wall. A brass wall? Asked Derrick. Yes, a shiny copper-coloured wall, said Nanny Piggins. It was the famous brass wall that surrounded the floating island of Aeolia. How can an island float? Asked Michael. I don't know, said Nanny Piggins, but they could do so many extraordinary things in the ancient story days. Build labyrinths, divert rivers to clean stables, talk to flying sheep. It shouldn't be surprising that they found a way to make an island float about freely in the middle of the sea. Said Michael. It sounds a lot like it was just a big boat then. Well, it wasn't, snapped Nanny Piggins. It was a floating island with a brass wall. Do you want to hear the story, or would you rather I read to you from the encyclopedia a whole load of actual facts? Michael's teacher had been trying to teach him facts all day, many of them to do with mathematics, so the last thing he wanted was to be exposed to more of them. Oh no, I'm sorry to interrupt with scientific reasoning. I don't know what I was thinking. Please continue. The king of Aeolia was Aeolus, said Nanny Piggins, and when Odysseus slammed her boat into the side of his island, He was delighted. Delighted, said Samantha. Oh, yes. Aeolus ran down to the bronze wall to see who it was, said Nanny Piggins. That is one of the many advantages of having a bronze wall surround your island. When someone slams into the side of it, it makes a sound like a big reverberating clang, just like the toll of a bell. Much more effective than our modern doorbells, let me tell you. So Aeolus popped his head over the top of the bronze wall and saw Odysseus and her ships below. "Yoo-hoo!" cried Aeolus. "Hello down there. Would you like to come up to my palace for some dinner?" "Greetings," called Odysseus. "I am Odysseus, famed general of the Trojan War, builders of the—" Yes, don't waste all your good stories now," said Aeolus. "Come up to the palace so everyone can hear them. There are only 12 people in my family, and we run out of things to say to each other. If I have to hear Brandon's story about the time he caught 2 fish with 1 hook again, I will go spare." Now, Odysseus had obviously had some unfortunate experiences, taking a man onto unknown islands only for them to be killed by whoever she met there. So this time she hesitated and consulted her second-in-command. "Eurylochus, perhaps you'd better wait here while I check to see if they're murderous, deranged psychopaths," suggested Odysseus. "Yeah, that's probably a good idea," agreed Eurylochus. Having seen so many of his comrades get eaten, he wasn't in a rush to meet a lot of new murderous psychopaths either. So Odysseus went up to the palace. It was a magnificent building, but as she approached, the beauty of the architecture was exceeded by an even greater beauty. "The beauty of Aeolus's wife?" asked Derrick. "No, though that's a good guess. There usually are beautiful women on mysterious islands," said Nanny Piggins. "Aeolus' wife was very pretty, but not an evil witch or cannibal or any of the usual problems with women Odysseus came across. No, the great magical beauty of the island was the smell, because Odysseus could smell cake. Wafts of the most fabulous, freshly baking cake. Now, Odysseus was a Piggins, so she had a refined nose. She could distinguish all the beautiful subtleties. The chocolate cake, the lemon cake, the Victoria sponge, the Black Forest cherry cake with freshly whipped cream. Her snout could smell them all. Aeolus led her up to the banquet hall, and there Odysseus saw the riches for herself. There was a long table, and covering every inch of its surface was cake. Every type of cake imaginable, and Aeolus's family were all gathered round, happily munching on the cake together. "As you can see, we have all the riches we could dream of here on our lovely island," said Aeolus. "The only thing we lack is news of the wider world. We love having visitors who can tell us stories of their travels." "Well, I do have lots of stories," said Odysseus. "I will tell you them all, if you send some of this fine cake down to my men." "Of course," said Aeolus. "They shall all feast on cake and chocolate milk while you tell us of your adventures." And so that is what Odysseus did, said Nanny Piggins. And as we know, Odysseus was cunning, so she really drew the stories out, knowing that the longer she took to tell them all, the more her men would get to feast on fine cake and rest in the ships below. So they'd be fit and ready to sail all the way home to Ithaca. So Odysseus talked and talked and talked for an entire month. "A month!" said Michael. "And she never ran out of stories?" asked Samantha. "No, after all, she was a Piggins," said Nanny Piggins, "and she had invented the Trojan horse, so she had a creative mind. Aeolus and his family loved it. They asked lots of follow-up questions, got Odysseus to act out the exciting bits, and do all the silly voices for all the different characters, so they all had a wonderful time. But after a whole month had passed, Odysseus knew it was time to resume her journey home to Ithaca. "Aeolus, thank you so much for all the delicious cake, but I really must be getting my men back to Ithaca. Their families will be missing them. It has been 10.5 years now." "Oh, of course," said Aeolus. "Thank you for all your wonderful tales. So much more interesting than anything Brandon has to say for himself. We're very grateful. I shall provision your ships for your return journey." "Wow, thanks," said Odysseus. She'd fallen more than a little bit in love with the sour cherry danishes that Aeolus always served at his table, and she had seriously considered abandoning her return journey so she could stay on the floating island and eat them for all eternity. But she knew she shouldn't, so she agreed. After the ships had been piled high with cake, Aeolus walked Odysseus down to the bronze wall to say goodbye. "There's one more thing," said Odysseus. "We got a bit lost in the fog, so can you tell me which direction to sail to get home to Ithaca? We're not familiar with this part of the sea, and I don't want to go in the wrong direction." "Oh, I can do better than that," said Aeolus. "I can give you this bag," with which he handed Odysseus a great big leather bag. "Oh, thank you," said Odysseus uncertainly. The bag was large, but very light. "But I don't usually carry a handbag." "Oh, no," said Aeolus. "This isn't an ordinary bag. It is a special bag." "Are you sure?" asked Odysseus. "It looks a lot like a regular leather bag." "Oh, no," said Aeolus. "I was given this bag by Zeus himself." "Oh, no, not Zeus," said Samantha. "He's such a rotter. He isn't going to turn up and start kidnapping nymphs again, is he?" "No, not this time," said Nanny Piggins. "You see, Zeus needed to punish Poseidon, so he took Poseidon's winds that he uses to control the movements across the seas, and he trapped all the winds inside this bag. Then he gave me the bag to mind." "Really?" said Odysseus. "Yes, you know Zeus," said Aeolus. "He doesn't like to micromanage. He gave me the winds. He told me to keep them imprisoned and let them out only as I saw fit. Well, you've been such a delightful dinner party guest. I'm giving the bag to you. All you have to do is let out the west wind, and it will blow you all the way home." So Odysseus did just that. He carefully reached in and pulled just the west wind out of the bag and then fastened it back up, and then he let the west wind go. The wind billowed out and filled their sails. The men cheered. A strong wind meant that they wouldn't have to row. Odysseus tied the rest of the winds tightly in the bag, stowed the bag safely in the hull of the ship, took the tiller, and began steering them home. For 9 days and 9 nights the west wind blew the ships. After everything that had gone wrong along their journey, Odysseus was frightened that this good fortune would come to an end, so she stayed awake that whole time, steering the ship herself. "So finally things were going well," said Samantha. "Well, it seemed that way," said Nanny Piggins, "but sometimes things can go too well." "What could possibly go wrong with that?" "Well, because the wind was blowing them, the men didn't have to row," said Nanny Piggins. "So the men had nothing to do except sit around eating cake and gossiping. And they'd been sitting in the boat for a long time, so the only new thing they had to gossip about was the mysterious big sack Odysseus had hidden in the hull. In the ancient Greek story days, it was customary for a general to split any treasure she won with her whole crew, and Odysseus had not shared what was in that sack. It was a big sack, so for Odysseus to be secretive about it, they knew it must contain something good, and they grew to resent Odysseus keeping that sack all to herself. But Odysseus never slept, so there was nothing they could do about it. That was until the 10th day. Finally, after 10.5 years of being away from their families, on the far horizon they spotted the island of Ithaca, their beloved homeland. The men cheered and wept with joy. As they drew closer, they began to make out the familiar sights, the hills, the cliff faces, and as they drew closer still, they could see the buildings and the people. They were almost close enough to call out to them. "Finally, we've made it," said Odysseus. A great wave of exhaustion swept over her. She handed the tiller to Eurylochus. "I can't keep my eyes open a moment longer," said Odysseus. "Oh, I'm so glad to have brought you all safely home. I'll soon be seeing my husband again. I must rest for a few moments before I see him." So Odysseus lay down and instantly fell into a deep sleep. The ship would be landing in a matter of minutes. Once on land, they would all be going to their separate homes, and there would be no more chance to split the treasure in the sack. If they were to find out what was in it, now was their chance, while Odysseus was still asleep and before they landed. So the men snuck over to the sack and loosened the strings. "Oh, no," said Michael. "Exactly," said Nanny Piggins. "The second the sack opened the tiniest fraction of 1 millimetre, all the winds in the world burst out. Spurred on by Poseidon's rage, the winds whipped up the ships and flung them back across the sea in a terrible storm. The ships were buffeted and tossed and drenched for hours. Then all of a sudden there was an enormous gong. The wind died away, and they realized their ship had just slammed back into the bronze wall of Aeolia. They were right back where they had started. They were shocked. A few moments later, King Aeolus popped his head over the wall. "Greetings, friend! Who goes there?" "King Aeolus, it is I, your friend Odysseus," said Odysseus. I'm afraid we've had a misfortune. I took a nap, and my men were more than a little bit naughty, and now we've ended up back here. Please, friend, help me get back on track." There was a dreadful silence, and then, "Get away from here this instant," commanded King Aeolus, no longer the jovial host. "To come here in this manner, you must have angered the gods. I will not protect one who has angered the gods." "Oh, please, I just annoyed Poseidon a little bit by blinding his hideous, monstrous, one-eyed, man-eating son," said Odysseus. "Oh, and we did embarrass Zeus when we got beaten up by a bunch of primitive peasants," Eurylochus reminded him. "Oh, and you did do all that dodgy stuff in the war," added Polites. "Not very honourable." "Yes, but apart from that," said Odysseus, "we've been fairly well behaved by ancient Greek hero standards anyway." "Just get out," ordered Aeolus. "The gods clearly detest you. I shall not aid anyone detested by the gods." "What are you saying? You mean you're not going to give us any cake?" asked Odysseus. "No cake for you." "Not even one sour cherry Danish?" asked Odysseus in horrified disbelief. "No cake and no Danishes," declared Aeolus. "Oh, okay," said Odysseus, tears rolling down her face. "Oh, this story is so sad," wept Boris. "Aeolus didn't even give them a honey sandwich." "Nothing," said Nanny Piggins. Odysseus and her men had to take hold of their oars and start rowing out across the great expanse of sea. "Well, at least none of them died in this story," said Derrick. "No," said Nanny Piggins. "At least not yet. The end. Time for bed." "I feel a bit traumatised by that one," said Michael. "I know what will cheer you up," said Nanny Piggins. "Let's take a boat to Han's bakery, fill it up with as much cake as possible, then go sailing, just like Odysseus." "Would that be safe?" asked Samantha. "Well, if it is unsafe," said Nanny Piggins, "we'll just have to eat all the cake as a safety precaution." And that seemed reasonable. So that's exactly what they did. They even bumped into the retired army colonel who lived around the corner and was desperately in love with Nanny Piggins as he came back carrying an Octo-Choc chocolate cake ready to propose to her again. So she refused the proposal but took him and the cake with them on their expedition. The end. Time for bed. All right, well, we'll leave it there. I hope you enjoyed that story. Oh, there's some crackers coming up with Odysseus. We're coming up to Circe or Circe. I'll have to look up the pronunciation. And some really good stories. It's getting good. So I might not do one next week, but we'll get back to Odysseus in the next week or two. So don't forget the book launch on the 8th, live streaming. And obviously, look, if your parents don't let you go on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, that's totally understandable. I don't let my kids on much social media either. So it will also be on my website, and I will upload it as a podcast, so you can get it through Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So it will be there. Everyone will be able to listen to it eventually within 24 hours. So it'll all be there. Another thing to keep in mind, it's on the 8th of March, 1 p.m. Sydney, Australia time. Now, when you're working out what time that is for you, if you are in America or Europe or England, just be careful you get the right day, because 1 p.m. on Saturday in Australia will probably be late at night or in the afternoon on Friday in America. So the 8th in Australia is the same as the 7th in those other parts of the world. It's very complicated. If you go online and look it up on an international meeting calendar, you'll be able to check it all out. Or if you go into your iPhone and look at the world clock, you can sort of work it out. But just be mindful that in Australia and indeed New Zealand, we're sort of at the front end of the world clock. So oftentimes you're on a separate day to us. Okay, well, I think we've covered everything. So that's it for now. Until next time, goodbye. Hello, it's me again. If you enjoyed listening to Bedtime Stories with R.A. Spratt, it would be really helpful if you could like, subscribe, follow, and or review the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to now. Every little one of those digital affirmations helps, and the bigger this podcast gets, the more I can justify procrastinating from my real job to keep bringing these stories to you. Thank you.